Hello, everybody. My name is Tim Styling from ConnectALL. I'm the manager of knowledge management here with ConnectALL, and I'm excited to be walking through today's DevOps value stream mapping workshop with you. I'm hoping this is a very good use of your time and that you'll get an opportunity to get hands-on in the tool and practice actually building out your value stream map for today. If you have not done so already, you can see in the sticky note that's available right above the chat that you will need to navigate to valuestreammanagement.com in order to register for the free Value Stream Designer tool if you would prefer to participate in a hands-on fashion today. So let's go ahead and get started. I'll switch over to the slide deck. So the plan stops on today's journey as we're taking a step into the final frontier of software delivery. We'll start by discussing the basics of value stream mapping. I'll walk you through some of the features and functionality and how to use the Value Stream Designer tool. We'll spend the bulk of our time walking through an assessment so you can start to think about what your DevOps software delivery tool chain looks like. And those questions will be prompters so you can start to lay out your own map as we walk through. I'll then talk about how you can use your value stream map, so give you an opportunity to understand what you can do with that final output. And then finally, I'll wrap things up with a summary. And if anyone has any questions, I would be happy to address them. So as we get started, what I'm hoping that you'll take away with for today, if I've done my job correctly, I want you to learn what value stream mapping is and why it matters. If I've done my job, you'll also understand and get a chance to practice using the free Value Stream Designer tool in order to build your own map. I'll also walk you through how to create a basic value stream map using some questions that will get your brain juices flowing and get you to start thinking about each of the individual steps in your DevOps software delivery process. And then finally, I'll also walk through at the tail end of the presentation how eliminating waste can help you optimize your value stream map. So let's talk about the basics. What is value stream mapping? We'll discuss what it is. We'll talk about its traditional use in manufacturing, how we can adapt it to DevOps and software delivery, and finally, why it matters to you and your team. So as we think about DevOps, as we think about software delivery, this infinity sign is probably familiar to most of you. You know, there's a number of stages, and as we think about those stages, they all work together in a loop and for continuous operation, continuous improvement, and continuous development. But what happens if we dive a little bit deeper? So if we go into each of these individual stages and go beyond simply plan, code, build, so on and so forth, what exactly does that planning stage look like for your organization? Who are the teams that operate in there? What are the tools they're using? What are the individual steps that are required to get through the plan stage? And what is feeding into that plan stage from the other stages in order to provide feedback loops? If you're not sure about each of those individual moving parts, don't worry, you're not alone. Sometimes in software delivery for a lot of organizations, it feels like we're looking out into vast nothingness. You know, we know that in this case, we know that the universe is working in the way that it's supposed to, but we may not know how to identify each individual star as we're looking in the night sky. Likewise, within our software delivery process, each individual team may know what it's supposed to do. Some things may just have so naturally become part of the process that they just do them without thinking, but we don't often know what each of those individual pieces is and how they feed into the overall value stream as a whole. And so what we need is a way to see each of these individual steps, each of these individual tools, and how each of the individual team members work together. So before we dive into what we can use in order to see, let's first of all talk about what a value stream is. That is the first part of value stream mapping. So we need to make sure that we understand what that is. And according to the Gemba Academy, who specialize in lean education, it is all of the steps, including both value-added and non-value-added activities, that are required to move from a raw material state into the waiting arms of a customer. Now, notice there's nothing in there about software delivery. A value stream can be used for any activity that has a set of steps moving from point A to point B. And so something like your morning routine, that can be a value stream. You have to get out of bed, make yourself a cup of coffee, and get ready for the day, which culminates in you arriving at work. Although now that things are remote, it might just involve you going to your other desk. But here's an example of a value stream that has nothing to do with software. This is pizza delivery. And so we know that on the one end, we have a customer who's placing an order. On the other end, we have the completed delivery. And in between, there's a number of tools that are being used, like an oven, like the materials, which are cheese and sauce and bread. And then you need the cooks, and you need the delivery driver, and you need everything to be working in sync in order to deliver that completed pizza to the happy and hungry customer. Now, in software delivery, if we were to do the same thing, it might look a little something like this. A customer reports an incident. They may not be as hungry, but they are just as eager to get their problem solved. And so between the incident being reported and the code being deployed to fix their problem, there are a number of different steps that need to happen. There are a number of different teams that need to be involved. And so if we want to understand that, we have to have a method to visualize the steps in our DevOps process. We have to know within our software delivery value stream what each of those steps are and what tools those people are using and who's responsible for each of these steps. And so like you see here, in this case with stars, we need a map for our software delivery value stream. And so that's where value stream mapping comes into play. Again, notice there's nothing specifically here about software delivery. But what value stream mapping is it gives us a method to document, analyze, and improve the flow of information or materials, in this case, needed to deliver a product or service to the end consumer. So as we think about how value stream mapping originally came into being, we need to step out of the world of computers and out of the office and into an assembly line in a factory. So when value stream mapping was originally coming around in manufacturing, you were able to go up on the catwalks or take a walk on the factory floor and physically see the flow of material from the point when it comes in to when it's processed and assembled and packed, and then to when it's shipped off to the customer. So you may have some raw material like steel that comes in and that's morphed and shaped and built into an engine or a turbine or a fan, whatever it is you're assembling. You can physically see the flow. And so a value stream map in manufacturing may look something like this, where you have the supplier supplying the raw materials, you have the customer receiving the final material, the final output, and then in between you have each individual step that those raw materials have to go through in order to be delivered to the happy customer. And you may even have the times that each of these take and the cycle time and all of that other information that's important to know so that you can determine if you're being efficient and if you're meeting your goals. Things are similar but different in software delivery. You'll notice that within software delivery, there's different handoffs, there's different teams working on different things. So similar to manufacturing cells in that way, but it's also different. We can't go walking on the information superhighway and see the information flow. This is something that's done electronically. This is something that's done through a variety of online tools. This is something that may not even be tracked anywhere, and yet it's being done. And so you'll see that there's a lot of similarities, but also a lot of differences that make software delivery unique and a little bit different than manufacturing. So how could a map look in software delivery? Perhaps something like this. You'll see that you have a variety of stages from work intake through planning and development and quality all the way through deployment. And within that, you have different ways that the raw material, in this case, a request or an idea, enters into the value stream. And then you have different methods to not only get out to production, but then also you have feedback loops bringing information back to the very beginning of the cycle so that if there's a bug that occurs during testing, that can then be built. If there's if a customer has feedback, they can enter that into the system. So you'll see that when we take a look at software delivery, although there are some definitely unique parts of it, in the end, we can build something very similar to what we see in manufacturing and garner some of the same benefits from it. Now, why bother? Well, as we think about mapping our value stream and as we think about going through this exercise, not just with ourselves, but with getting our teams and surrounding teams involved, being able to build this out gives us a structure that helps not only our leadership, but also each of the individual teams within the value stream understand the end-to-end flow of work. No person is an island. What they do impacts the people after them and perhaps impacts the people in front of them. It allows you to have this visual structure so you can identify inefficiencies and you can see immediately, oh, that doesn't look right. And you can fix it, or you can come up with ideas to be able to address that inefficiency and target some potential opportunities to eliminate waste. And then finally, you can map those points of connections, those handoffs between different teams and different technology where things can fall through the cracks or where teams may not even be aware of where the information is coming in from. And so being able to have this allows you to map and understand those points of connection between different teams and different technologies. So now that we laid the framework, let's go ahead and talk about the tool we're going to use today, the Value Stream Designer. We'll talk about what it is. We'll make sure you can get registered effectively. And then finally, we'll walk through how to use it and teach you some of the basics of utilizing the Value Stream Designer. So first of all, what is this? The Value Stream Designer is a complementary mapping solution that is made specifically for software delivery. So again, as I mentioned before, there may be some similarities to the manufacturing map, but there's a lot of differences too. And so if you try to use the same tools that are available for a manufacturing organization, it may not work exactly how you need it to. But this tool is made specifically for software delivery with the icons and the tools and the structure that is going to make the most sense for software delivery organizations. And it comes preloaded with DevOps templates, with the tools that are most relevant for DevOps teams, and with icons that are going to be relevant as well. Now, the great thing about this is once with these icons, if there's something missing, if there's a tool that you're using that is not available by default, you can actually upload your own tools into this designer as well. And I'll walk you through how to do that here in a little bit. And finally, this is built for team collaboration. So with this tool, you'll see how you can actually share your maps with other people. Then they can come in and they can either only read it or they can edit it so that you're able to have other people contribute for things that may be a gap to your knowledge about the end-to-end value stream. Oh, and I see somebody asked in the chat, can we have a copy of the presentation and is the session recorded? So yes and yes. For the first question, there's a copy of the presentation available under the Handouts tab here in Big Marker. So if you go to Handouts, you can download the PDF file of these slides. And this session will be recorded, so you or anyone that would benefit from this can access it after that. So as we think about accessing the Value Stream Designer, the first thing you need to do is navigate to valuestreammanagement.com. And then once you've gone to valuestreammanagement.com, if you've already registered for an account, you'll see in the upper right-hand corner that there's a button to log in. If you're a new user and you have not done so, you can click on the Register tab, also in the upper right-hand corner, in order to get signed up for the first time. So let me switch over to my screen and show you what this might look like. So as you can see here on the screen, we've got the Value Stream Designer available on valuestreammanagement.com. So if you're a new user, you would come over here and click Register, at which point you will see some information that you can fill in order to get signed up. So you create your own username, you put in some of the additional credentials and put in your email address and then get registered. Once you've done so, you can then click Log In. And you can log into your account with your username and your password. So I'll go ahead and do that here. At which point, once I've logged in, you will then see a screen that looks like this. So we've got the canvas and we've got the home screen that automatically opens up. So go ahead and do this now. So go ahead and get logged in, get set up. And while you're doing that, I'm actually going to post up a poll. So you'll see now there's a poll available about how well you think folks in your organization know how they're connected to other teams. So how well do you think that organizations know about what's happening in front of them and behind them in the value stream? So do they know that perfectly, mostly, only for things that are happening directly in front or behind them, or not at all? They're completely siloed. So go ahead and answer this question and get logged in here within the value stream designer. And we'll go ahead and get things taken care of. All right, so let's see how the poll is looking. Okay, so it looks like most folks so far are saying only if it's directly in front of and or behind them. So it's only if it's in front of and or behind them. But I do see some folks that say not at all or mostly. So it seems like there's kind of a wide spectrum available here. So there's, and then I see somebody just said perfectly. So I'll give you guys another 10, 15 seconds, answer the poll and get logged into the value stream designer. And we shall see what exactly you guys think about this question. And 3, 2, 1. Okay, so I've just closed the poll and it looks like most folks, about 50%, said that folks really only know about what's happening in the value stream if it's directly in front of and behind them, which kind of makes sense. These are the folks that they may interact with specifically and where, they may receive direct inputs from. But if something is happening 2 or 3 stages in front or 2 or 3 stages behind, that may be a little harder to see. And then it looks like the second most popular answer was mostly, so there may be some gaps, but for the most part, they understand. The third most popular was not at all, completely siloed. And then one person's team has it nailed. It's, they know it perfectly. So that's good to know. All righty, so let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what you see when you first come on into the value stream designer. So the first thing you'll notice is that there's a welcome with a training video that you see here. So once you enter this, if you ever need to come back and get a refresher on how some of these different features work, you can watch the available video here. If you click on the plus icon, you'll notice that this is where you'll start a new value stream diagram, and you can actually scroll to the left and to the right in order to access different templates so that you don't have to start from scratch. So if there's any of those templates that look like the structure you're trying to put together or that you think is a close match to what you and your organization is trying to do, it keeps you from having to start from ground zero and to be able to build this out in just as you're going through. So now as we come to saved, what this allows you to do is open up a previously saved value stream diagram. So if you've already created a diagram, this is where you will access it. And this is where you will come in and access any of the older diagrams that you've been working on. So you can pick up right where you left off, or you can see one that you've already completed. You'll also notice that if you share it with people, you can see the last person that updated it, which may be you, or it may be someone else on your team. And then finally, if someone has shared a value stream with you, if you click on the share icon, you'll be able to see under this area all of the value streams that have been shared with you so that you can click in there. And if you've been given read-only access, you can see it. And if you've been given the opportunity to edit, you can start to edit that other person's value stream so that you can start to collaborate and build it out together. So let's go ahead and get a blank map started, and let's practice how we can do this. So what I want you to do is start by clicking New. So click the new plus sign icon. And I don't want to assume anything, so we'll just go ahead and start with the blank template for today. So scroll to the left on your screen until you find the blank diagram template, excuse me. And so once you've done that, click on the template, which will then open a pop-up icon where you can name your diagram and then save it. So let me show you on my screen what that looks like. So if I come over here, I will click New. I will scroll over until I find the blank diagram template. I'll go ahead and enter a name. Then I'll click Save. And you'll notice that once I've done so, I have access to this blank diagram. And I can know that it's the one that I created because if I look down here in the bottom right, there's my name. So the name that I just gave this diagram is appearing on here. I know that I'm ready to go. So go ahead and do that now for yourselves. Go ahead and set up a blank value stream diagram if you're following along. And while you're doing that, let's go ahead and start another poll. And in this case, I'd like to understand what your personal level of experience is with value stream mapping. Now, are you an expert? Is all of this review and something that you've heard a million times? Have you dabbled? Is this something where you have a little bit of expertise? You may have practiced building a value stream map once or twice, but it's not something that you do regularly. You know about it, you've heard about value stream mapping, but you've never actually done it, or you don't know anything about it at all, and this is the first time that you've ever explored the topic. So go ahead and open up a blank value stream diagram template and answer the poll so that we can start to see where different folks in the audience are. So it looks like at this point, most folks have dabbled. There's some that know about it. There's some that don't know anything at all as far as value stream mapping goes. Yeah, this seems like a very good group. It seems like we have people that are kind of all over as far as expertise. Some that have done it a little bit before, but are looking to improve. Some that are trying to learn about this for the first time, and some that have heard about it but may not have actually built out their map. So I think this will be definitely a good course for everyone. I'm very excited about this and very excited to see how we can work together on building some of these maps out and start to understand what some of this structure may look like. So I'll give everyone about 10 more seconds. In that time, if you have not answered the poll and you would like to, please do that now. And then go ahead and continue getting to your diagram. All right, and 3, 2, 1. I will go ahead and close the poll. All right, so it seems like the most popular answer we've had is I've dabbled. That was about 58%. So perhaps you've practiced making value stream maps before. This is something that, it's not necessarily your first rodeo, but don't quite want to call yourself an expert yet. That's good to know. And then we also have 25% that know about it but haven't done it. And then we have about 17% that this is kind of the first exposure. So I definitely appreciate you joining this to learn about such an exciting topic. And I hope I don't let you down. So as we continue, and as we work through the designer, I want to show you some of the different pieces that you can use within the designer and some of the different features that will help as you start to build out your value stream maps. First, if you look over on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll notice that the first option allows you access to different app icons. So in this area, there's a couple of different ways that you can find the tool of your choice. You can either use the search bar to try to search for a specific tool, or if you're curious about a wider category, you can scroll down in order to find, based on these different categories, what tools fit under those areas. And so what you're able to see is all of the individual tools that fit on a particular category. You can scroll to find those, or you can simply search for your tool. Now, once you've found the tool that you want to add to your value stream map, you simply need to click and drag and drop onto the canvas. And so once you've done that, you'll be able to start working here in the map with this tool. Now, the next area that you'll notice, if you click on flow icons, then what you'll see is that, once you're in this flow icon area, you can search for specific icons as well, and you can scroll down to find them too. Now, the difference between the applications and the flow icons is that these are not individual tools. These are icons that demonstrate something else within the process. So these might be something like you may have a manual approval. You might want to dictate that somebody's making a call into your support team and you want to use a little phone icon in order to demonstrate that. These are the icons that go beyond simply working in a tool and get to some of those other manual processes that might be a part of your value stream too. And so once you've done that and you found the flow icon that you want, same thing, you click and hold your mouse and you drag and drop that onto the canvas. Now, the third option is flow shapes. Now, these are very interesting because this allows you to have different shapes that you can resize and restructure in order to help with the development of how your board looks, in order to help with how your value stream map is structured, perhaps even to do something like designate different stages within your value stream map. In the same way as the other two options work, you can drag and drop the shape that you like onto the canvas. Now, once you have a shape onto the canvas, there's a few other things that you can do with it. You can double click on the shape once it's on the canvas, and you can bring up this pop-up menu. You can also resize the shape using the little squares that are available in the corners, as well as on the top, bottom, left, and right. Now, within this area, you can add text that will show up in your shape. I like doing that for different headers and titles, but you can really type the text in there for anything that you would like to use it for. Then you can change some of the structure of that text. You can change the font, the size of that text. You can change the properties, like you could bold it or italicize it, change the color. You could also change the alignment to bring it to the top or the bottom, or the top left corner, or whatever it is that you think is best. You can also change the color of the shape. You can change the border of the shape. You can change the thickness of the border. You can customize how it's layered. So, if you notice that it's covering some of the icons, you can send it backwards. If you want the shape to be on top of something, you can send it forwards. And you can also group some of these things together so that they're easier to move and easier to change the location. Then the final option on the left-hand side you'll see is the link style. Now, there's a couple different things you can do with this. As you're creating the links between the different tools or flow icons, whichever icons you're looking to create that connection between, there may be some times where aesthetically a different link style will look better. And that's really all this is. Right here, it's really just based on the aesthetics of it and which link style will look best based upon the value stream you're trying to create. Now, once you've found the one that you want to use, you can either click on it, which then makes sure that any future links that you use are going to have that style, or you can drag and drop a new link onto there. And I'll walk you through how to build some of these links here in a minute. Now, with the link, you have some of the same opportunities as with the box, or with the shapes, I should say. What you can do is you can add text to the link so that you're able to understand what the link is and what it's for. You can change the font, the size, and some of the properties of that text. You can also change the highlighting of the text so that you can help it show up a little bit easier on the link. You can change the color of the link. You can change the layering and the grouping of the link. And then finally, you could add some additional text to or from the ends of the links. And you can also change some of the properties of the arrows. So you can change what direction they're pointing, what color they are, or even what style of arrows that you want for your links. Now, the final piece I want to point up is in the upper right-hand corner. You'll notice that there's some diagram actions that you have available to you. So within this area, you'll see that you've got some of the typical actions. You can undo, redo, save, things like that. But two in particular that I wanted to point out is, first of all, the button that allows you to share. Now, clicking this share button is what allows you to collaborate with other team members and use that piece of the homepage that I showed you a little bit earlier, where you might have the opportunity to access some of the things that have been shared with you. So if you click on that share icon, you'll then be able to put in the email address of whoever it is that you want to share this with. And if they already have an account for the Value Stream Designer, they'll be able to log in and access that diagram that you've shared with them. And if they don't, then they'll get a prompt to register, at which point they will have access to that diagram. And then the other part I wanted to point out is upload icons. This is where you can upload an application or a flow icon. Like I was mentioning earlier, if there's something that you use that we don't have available by default, you can upload it in this area. So how does all of this come together? How do we use some of these different things? So what we're going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my screen and kind of kill two birds with one stone, because I saw that there was a question in the chat about templates if Azure DevOps Server is available. So what I've actually done is I've clicked on the application icon, and I can search for, in this case, Azure, at which point if I hover over some of these, you'll see I have Azure DevOps Code, and Azure DevOps Server. So if I wanted to find something like Azure DevOps Server, I could do that straight through here. But let me go ahead and demonstrate how this works if I were to try to create my very own value stream map. Well, I'll start with something like ServiceNow. So if I come over here, I click and hold my icon on the ServiceNow button, and I drag and drop it here onto the canvas. You'll notice that ServiceNow is now right here on my canvas. If I come over here to flow icons, let me go ahead and say, if my technical support team is working in ServiceNow and they receive a request about an incident or something that's happening in production, there's two different ways that people can reach them. They could either email them or they could call them over the phone. So in this case, I'm actually going to scroll down a little bit, see if there's anything I like, and I'm actually going to stop here in the IT section. And so what I'm going to do is click and hold on this letter icon and click and hold on this phone icon. So you'll then see I now have three icons here directly on my canvas. What I'll do now is if I hover over either of these icons, you'll notice that I have four little circles that have just showed up. If I click and hold on one of the circles, I can then drag and drop a link between the mail icon and ServiceNow. I'm going to do the same for the phone. So what this tells me is that information is flowing between these icons. But I want to do a little bit more. I want to show exactly what this connection means and what it does. So in order to do that, if I double click on this one, I can give it a name. Let's say email sent. I can come down here, and if I come over here to the first box, I can change the highlighting behind the text so that it shows up a little bit easier on the white canvas. Then if I come down here, I can click on this middle arrow and change the direction so that I can show that the flow of information goes from the customer emailing and then coming on in to ServiceNow. So then if I come over here, what I can do at the bottom is if I double click, I can go ahead and I can say call made to support. I'll go ahead and change the background, and I can change the direction as well. So you'll now see that I have two separate inflows going from either an email being sent or a call being made to support into ServiceNow. Now, this doesn't have to be, an email or a phone. Based upon whatever you use in order to fill in this information, you can make the icons and you can go ahead and set them up how you see fit. That's the great thing about this tool is my value stream's not going to look the same as yours, which is not going to look the same as somebody else in the audience. And so yours may look a little different. So you might use a different icon. As an example, I see someone in the chat said that they might use fill in a form rather than an email or a phone call to report an incident. That's great. You could use a different icon, or you could use the same icon and change the text to tell me this is a form being filled out. It's not an email or a phone. And so the final thing I can do is if I come here to this this third area, which is the different flow shapes, if I click and hold my mouse here on the rectangle icon, I can drag it here, I can resize it, then I can double click, and I'll type in my text, incident management. And then let me go ahead and push this up to the very top where I see incident management. So then from here, what I can do is I can go ahead and change the size. And then if I change the background to make it white, you'll notice, all of my icons are gone. So what I can do in this case is come over here. I'll say send to back, which then shows all of my icons here. And so now you'll see the very beginning of a value stream. You'll start to see some sort of structure that is showing you a little bit how things are starting to flow. You can see that we have the very beginning of where incidents are being reported. So either an email is sent or a call is made. That information is entered into ServiceNow, and then we can start to build out from there. So go ahead and practice working through this on your own. See if you can see if you can build something. It doesn't have to be exactly like mine, but practice using some of these different options. Drag and drop some of the applications onto the screen. Drag and drop some of the flow icons onto the screen. See if you can build those links and use those flow shapes. And while you're practicing that, I'll give you a little bit of time to do that. And I'll go ahead and actually start another poll while that's happening. So this poll is asking if you've ever used an online value stream mapping tool before. If this is your first time using a tool like this, then I'd be very curious about this. If you've used another tool online before, I'd be interested to know that too. Or if you've used manual tools, like if you've never used an online tool, but you have built a value stream map using a whiteboard or sticky notes or things like that, it'd be very interesting to know as well. So while you're filling out that survey, let's see, I'll take a look here in the chat. So I see that there was a comment about only having a few options. One idea I have on that is if you were to double click on your icon, it may show up with just a few options. Or if you double clicked on something else, it may not show as many options as you have if you double click on a shape, or if you double click on a link. So I would recommend trying that if you're not seeing as many options. Try either clicking on something else, or try adding a new shape to your value stream, or try adding a new icon to your value stream to see if that works. Awesome, I see you got it. All right, let's see how the poll is going. Looks like about 50% of people have not used an online value stream mapping tool. it looks like, I guess things have changed a little bit. It looks like now about 40% have used manual tools and 30% have not used an online tool before. So we're sitting at about 70% that have not used a value stream mapping tool online and about 30% that have. So I'll give another 10 seconds or so to fill in the survey if you would like. Otherwise, we will go ahead and move on to the next step in 3, 2, 1, and I'll close the poll. So the final results of this poll, so we've had about 25% of people that have used an online value stream mapping tool before, and then we've had about 33% that have not used a tool, so have not used an online or I would assume a manual tool before, because we have about 42% that mentioned they had used manual tools like a whiteboard or sticky notes, probably dry erase markers, things like that. So built maybe perhaps a more manual value stream map. So with that, we have about 25% that have used an online tool and about 75% that have not. So this will be very exciting for those that have not used a tool before. And this will also probably be very exciting for those that have, just to be able to compare and contrast between the tool that you have experience using. So I'll switch back to my slides. And let's go ahead and talk through this value stream assessment. So we're going to walk through a variety of questions here that will help you start to think through each of the individual DevOps stages and how they might work in your organization. Now, the goal for today is to map out a basic value stream tool chain for your DevOps processes that will give you a structure or something to share and discuss with your team. Now, I'm also cognizant of the fact that this workshop is an hour and a half long. It's something where some of these processes may be something you're either not sure of. Some of these answers to these questions might be something that you need to ask somebody else within your team. Some of the answers to these questions you might know or think you know, but you're not quite sure. My recommendation would be if you know the answer and you've got it and you're like, okay, I can go ahead and start building this out, I would recommend that you start building it out within your value stream map that you have for the training today. Now, if you're not sure of the answer, but you can make a guess, I would recommend putting that on your value stream map as well, because that gives you a structure that you can use to begin discussing with other people in your organization or on your team. Now, the final piece is if you're just not sure, I would go ahead and if you don't know the answer to a question, what I would do is perhaps write it down or perhaps even download the slides that I have available on the, in the handouts section here. And I would download those slides and I'd start a conversation with them. Perhaps reach out to someone in your organization that you think works in the plan stage or works in the deploy stage and see if they can answer that question for you. Or better yet, share the value stream diagram with them and have them fill it in and have them correct it. So this is something where what we do today is not the end all be all. You can tweak it, you can work on it with your team, and I would recommend having multiple people work together on it within one of the value stream maps. So let's go ahead and dive on in. And we'll start with the plan stage. Now, I'll go ahead and walk through some of these with you using a hypothetical scenario. And I'll build the first couple in my value stream map so you can see what that looks like. And then from there, I'll give you guys an opportunity to kind of think through it a little bit. And we'll work through each of these questions individually. So when it comes to planning, there's kind of two different ways to look at it. There's, if something's a new feature or an enhancement, or if something is an incident, a bug, an issue. And so we'll start on the requirements management side as we start to think through a new feature or a new enhancement. And so the question that I have for you, when somebody has a new idea for a feature or for an enhancement, where does it start? What's the first step? How does somebody know what the first step is? And how does an idea enter into the pipeline? How does an idea enter into the backlog to then perhaps be actioned on later. So in this hypothetical example, you'll notice that I have, again, the letter icon flowing into ServiceNow. So in this example, there's a project manager who solicits ideas from folks within the organization. Now there's a generic email that they use, and folks will email any of the ideas that they have for the project manager to then add to ServiceNow. And so if I were to try to build this out, what I'm going to do is I'll switch back over to my screen. Let me actually delete this. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the little letter icon. So let me come up here and search for letter. I will drag and drop that here on the screen. And so somebody's going to email the team that's working in ServiceNow. I'll drag this over here, and I'll draw the connection between these two teams. And then what I can do is I'll say email to PM. So email to the project manager. I can change the background if I want to make it a little easier to see. And then what I could even do is I'll change that to a different type of arrow if I want, to show that it's flowing from here to here. I don't have to do that, but I can. So what I'll do, so you'll see that we have the very start of the value stream where somebody emails to the project manager an idea that they might have. So let's go ahead and switch back to the slides. And so think about that for your own organization. How does a new idea for a feature get its start? How does somebody suggest something that could be a good enhancement? And this could be internal or external. Perhaps there's a way for customers to be able to get an idea into the pipeline. Or perhaps there's a way for folks that are internal to your organization to suggest something that might be a good addition to the product. So go ahead and think about that for a second and determine how that idea gets its start. I'll just take a quick sip of water. Okay. So again, not all ideas are good ideas, and not even all good ideas are ones that can be actioned on. And so there has to be some sort of vetting process to take a look at these ideas and determine, first of all, are they something that our organization wants to do? And if so, when do we want to do them? Is this something that we need to action on immediately, or something that's lower priority that goes into the backlog? So what does that process look like for your organization? Are there any vetting or approval processes for some of these incoming new features? Is there any way for your organization to vet through these and figure out which ones need to be actioned on? So in this hypothetical example, what you'll notice is that after the new feature has been added to ServiceNow, there's two different paths it can take. And those paths that it can take are determined by how much of an investment is going to be required. Is it something that's going to require a lot of investment in man hours and tools and in time, or is it something that can be completed a little quicker? So if it's going to be a larger scale investment, in this case over 10,000 in resources, then there's a committee that takes a look at these larger scale projects and determines, okay, are these important? If so, when do we want to do them? If it's a smaller project, if it's under 10K, then that goes directly to a project manager who determines based upon what the organization wants to do with the software, based upon what they already have in the pipeline, and based on which enhancements are most important based upon the vision that the organization has, that project manager has the power to determine when and where that particular enhancement could be done, or if it's going to be done at all. So let's go ahead and switch back to the screen. And let me practice doing that. So I'll come over here to the flow icons, and I'll take a look. Let me just search for group. You'll see, here we go, we got a group. I'll drag them over here. And then let me come over here as well, and let me find someone that might look like. I can use them for this. So I'll come down here and I'll find an icon, perhaps this one. I'll draw a link between these two. And you know what I can do? Actually, instead of doing that, I'm going to come over here and I'll switch it up to more of a straight line curve. And so that looks like more of a straight line. And so you'll see when I clicked on that, that I can actually change the shape of whichever line I'm using to create if I think the straight looks a little bit better in the context of my value stream. Then I'll come over here and I'll say over 10K. Change the background. And I can do this. Then if I were to come over here, I can update the link name and say under 10K. I can change the background, and I can change the direction of the arrow so that you can see that things are flowing in one direction in this part of the value stream. So go ahead and practice that and see if there are any vetting or approval processes that you can think about for incoming new features. Give it some thought and think about what that'll look like and how that's vetted in your organization. So I'll give you another another couple seconds here to think through that and perhaps to even start drawing it out on your value stream diagram. Okay. So whatever vetting process you go through, once something's approved and once you've decided we want to go forward with this idea, this is something that we want to do, this is important enough to our organization and serves enough of a business purpose that we want to move forward with this. Well, what happens next? How does it get from the planning stage into the arms of the developers and give them the information they need in order to be able to build this out, in order to meet the user's needs based upon what this enhancement or this feature is going to be? In this hypothetical example, you'll see that regardless of which path it goes on, the developers need some requirements docs to work off of. And so based upon those requirements documentations, those are added into a Confluence environment. From that Confluence environment, what you can see is then the information flows from there, and those requirements documents are broken down into stories within Jira, into epics within Jira, sorry about that, into epics within Jira, and then broken down from those epics into individual stories for the developers, for the folks that are building out the code to be able to work on. And so that gives them targeted user stories to be able to contribute to based upon the requirements that have been set up for this individual enhancement. So go ahead and think about what that looks like in your organization. Once something's been approved, once a new feature or a new enhancement has been approved, what happens next? What is that next step? And how does that get added into the pipeline and get added into the development structure? So go ahead and think about that. And if anyone has any thoughts on how this works in their organization, go ahead and share them in the chat. If there's any tools that you use for any of these individual steps, you can add those to the chat as well. And you can perhaps see if there's other people here that are doing things the same way that you are, or that might be doing things a little bit different. And if somebody's not quite sure about how that might look in their organization, perhaps your contribution may trigger something in their mind and think, oh, great, this is actually something that this actually sounds like something we do too. So, if you have any ideas that you want to add to the chat, I'm sure people would be very happy to see them. All right, I'll give you guys another couple seconds here to think through this question. All right. So as I mentioned before, there are kind of two different ways that there's two different ways that some of these to-dos can enter into the pipeline. There's the things that are enhancements, that are features that maybe nice to have additions that are that'll be good to have in your software delivery. But there's also incidents. There's bugs that come up. There's things in production that don't quite work how they're supposed to. And so in this case, you may have issues that need to be reported. And so in this case, I want you to think about, how do users and or customers report issues from production? How do people let you know that something's not quite going right? Maybe something's not working how it's supposed to. Once once we've released the code into the wild, how do you find that out? In this example scenario, in this hypothetical scenario, what you'll notice is that, kind of similar to the example that I threw out earlier, people are able to contribute, or people are able to reach out to tier 1 support. So they can reach out, via email or via chat. They can also call via phone to these tier 1 support. And as they're connected with this tier 1 support, if it's a simple problem, then they can go ahead and fix it. If it's just something like, there's a password that they need reset, or something simple like that, they can go ahead and take care of it at tier 1's level. But if it's something more complex that tier 1 is not able to help with, then from there they escalate to tier 2, and they store this information also within ServiceNow. So they would escalate to the tier 2 level by opening a ticket within ServiceNow, so that tier 2 can begin to help this customer solve their problem. So in your case, how does this work? If a customer or a user, or even someone internal has an issue that they notice from the code in production, how do they report that? And how do you get to know about it? So go ahead and give that some thought. Think about how you would find out that information, how you would find out about issues in production, and go ahead and fill that into your value stream as well. Think about how that side of things would work. Give you another couple seconds here to work through that. Okay. So after an issue has been reported, how do they then get into the hands of the developers? So somebody reports an issue, something's wrong, that they're having some difficulty with the software. How does that then get into the backlog so that the developers can begin working on it? Well, in this hypothetical scenario, what we see is that if tier 2 recognizes this is a software problem, this isn't something that we can triage and support. We need to actually have a code fix in order to make this happen. At that point, they escalate to tier 3, and those tier 3 support folks take a look at the ticket, take a look at the information, and determine, okay, how are we going to fix this? What's our strategy? What in the code needs to be updated? And from there, they will update that as a bug. And those tier 3 support folks are able to add that as a bug into the Jira environment so that the developers can see that bug and take it from there. So how does that work in your organization? If a customer reports an issue, not all of them need code fixes, but some of them might. So how does that information get from the customer to the developers? What are those steps that are required to go through here in the planning stage so that that information can get to the people that are able to fix their problem, especially if it's something that's code level, especially if it's something where they need that information or they need some sort of fix that goes beyond just, that goes beyond support's level of scope. So go ahead and think about that here. Think about what that might look like for your organization. I'll give you another couple seconds to do that. Okay. So now it's time to code. So the story or the bug or whatever issue you have has been reported. And at this point, the developers need to start coding. So when you think about the developers writing and storing their code, where are they doing that? What tool are they using, or where are they placing this information? Where's that coding work being done? How are they doing that? Is it something that you have some sort of standardized process around? Is it kind of, everyone's kind of doing their own thing? What does that look like for your organization? And so in this example, what we'll notice is that the code repositories are being held in a Git environment. And so within this Git environment, this is where the code is being added. This is where the code is being uploaded to and accessed. And this is where the developers are at work. So think about that from your end. Once they've started working on a story or a bug or a task or something like that, something that requires code, where are they doing that? Where is that code being stored? What does that work look like for them? So go ahead and think about that for your organization, what that looks like and where that's being done. And think about how it moves from that step of being reported into being coded. I'll give you a couple more seconds to think about that. All right, so after the developer has finished coding and finished creating the code that they have to be able to address the story or the bug or the other issue that you have, do you have any mechanism for peer reviews? So that other folks in the organization, other developers, perhaps a supervisor, can review the code and check it and make sure it's working properly. So what, if any, tools are you using for code reviews? So for peer reviews of that code that the developer is creating. And so in this example, what we have is that, the code from Git, once it's been done, those code reviews are being done within Bitbucket. And so different folks can review that code within the Bitbucket environment, and we can determine, okay, does this look good? Does it need any work? How is that going? And so if you've got any sort of system for peer review, for code reviews, go ahead and think about how that works and at what stage that comes into play, and perhaps what even tool is being used, if any. So go ahead and think about that. Consider how code reviews work in your organization, and then go ahead and add them to your map. Get that scoped out how you see fit. What is that next step after the code, after the developer believes the code is completed and ready for review? How does that review process look for your organization? So go ahead and think about that here for another couple seconds, and then we'll move on to the next step. So the next stage that we see is the build stage. And so as we think about building, after the code has been developed and reviewed and, it's ready for build, what are your developers using for these new builds? Is there a tool that they're using? Are they doing these builds in something like Jenkins or another tool? How is this being addressed? Now, in this example scenario, what we see is that, the build is also being done in the Bitbucket environment. So, the code is reviewed, then the build is done within the same environment using Bitbucket. And from here, they're able to build out the code and able to prepare it for the next stage. So go ahead and think about if there's, what sorts of tools your organization uses for this. Where is it being done? Who's doing it? What happens once the code is ready for that build stage? Go ahead and think about that here. Update your map if you're following along in the map, or think about that and store it in your back pocket for later if you're going to then build out your map after this call. So go ahead and think about that here for another second or two, and then we'll go on to the next stage. And what you'll notice is that we're working through each of those 8 DevOps stages as we're thinking about it. Now, this process works very similarly, even if your organization is using Waterfall or some other methodology. You may not have the exact same stages and the exact same steps, but you can start to think through, perhaps some of these questions and how it relates to your organization, even if you or someone you know is not using DevOps. But because this is a DevOps focused call, that's kind of how we're addressing this. But just know that these tactics work well, even if you're using something other than DevOps. All right, so now we move from build into test. And what tools are you using to track your testing? And what does that testing look like? Is there a particular tool where those tests are being done? Is there a particular tool where you're tracking the results of those tests? And then if something comes up, what happens? So in this example, what you see is that our test cases are being sent over to Micro Focus ALM. And then based on the tests, information can flow between Micro Focus ALM and Bitbucket as many times as needed. Now, if something's found, if there's a defect that's detected, if there's something that doesn't quite work, that defect is actually sent back to Jira in the form of a bug to then be updated in the code, then be reviewed, then be tested. And so this allows us to have a system in place, a certain feedback loop in place, if you will, where information is being able to pass back further into the, pass back into a previous stage so that it can be worked on. If there's a defect, we want to be able to fix it as soon as possible. And we don't want to release this into the wild with a known defect. So, we go through this circle as many times as needed until the code is ready to go. So how does that work for you? What tools are you using to track your testing? Where is your testing being done and how is it being done? Let's go ahead and think about that here for a quick second. Now, one other question to ask during the testing stage is, in addition to test cases, in addition to tracking for defects, is there any other code scanning that's happening? What's happening during these code review stages? Are you looking for things like vulnerability? Where is security getting involved? Is there any tools that you're using in order to automatically scan for some of these things, or is your process all manual? And so in this case, what we see for the hypothetical organization here on the screen, you'll notice that the security scans that are being done looking for vulnerabilities are today all manual. And so these are manual scans that need to be done. So you'll see that I've used a flow icon instead of an application icon to show that, okay, these are security scans being done, but they're being done manually by the security team. Let's go ahead and think about if, in addition to the test cases or in addition to some of the manual testing that you may be doing, what other scans are happening? What else is your team looking for? And how are they finding that? Let's go ahead and think about that here now. And then once you've finished testing, where do the results of those tests and those code reviews go? Although that feedback loop is working and you're finding these vulnerabilities, how does your team get to know about them? Where do the results of these go? Are they being stored anywhere? Is there a tool or an area where you're keeping these results of your tests so that people can reference back to them and see what the results of the tests were and what actions need to be taken? So in this example, you'll see that any test results are actually being sent to a dedicated Microsoft Teams channel specifically for test results. And from there, the team takes those results and they update them. It's somebody's job and somebody's role to update those in a Microsoft Word document as a backup. So we have the information available in Microsoft Teams, and we have the information available in Microsoft Word in an ongoing document. And so go ahead and think about where those results of the tests are, where they're being housed, and how that information is reaching your team. And give that just a little bit of thought here before we move on to the next stage. Okay, so the tests have been done, the build has been completed. We're ready to move towards release. So once you're ready to move into a staging environment, what happens then? Are there any change requests that you need to put in? Are there any approvals that you need to find? What has to happen in order for you to move into that next step, into a staging environment, so that you can see how it's going to do before you release that feature or that enhancement into production? Is there a staging environment owner that you have to get permission from? Is there anything else that you need to do within that staging environment in order to reach a level of confidence where you feel good releasing that into production? So in this example, you'll see that the developer needs to reach out to the owner of that staging environment just to see if they're able to use that staging environment for this particular feature or this particular bug fix, I should say. So once that staging environment is available, they'll go ahead and upload to that staging environment this fix or this enhancement or this feature. And from there, they'll do regression testing using Micro Focus ALM. So go ahead and think about what that process looks like. Once you're in a staging environment and putting in the final preparation towards deployment, what are those steps that you and your team need to do? Go ahead and think about what that looks like. If there's any approvals that need to be done, if there's perhaps a supervisor that needs to get involved here and give the thumbs up, or if there's a manager that controls this process, or anything else that needs to happen, whether via tool or manually, in order for your code to get to this point. Think about that here as you start moving towards ultimately deployment. Now, once you're ready to push your code to production, what happens next? So you've done all of your testing, you've tried it out in a staging environment, and now you feel confident and okay, let's go ahead and get this out to production. What happens next? Well, you'll see here in this hypothetical organization, there's actually a handoff that happens between the development team and the operations team. So the development team will then say, whoever's finished the staging, the stage environment owner will say, okay, this is ready to go. So they'll alert the ops team, who then takes it from there. The other folks will then take it from there, and that will then be operations deal to go forward. So go ahead and think about what happens once you're ready to push your code to production and once you're approved and ready to go. So go ahead and think about that here now. All right. So after release, and after you've gotten to this stage and you're ready to release, how do you track what was in that release? How do you make sure your customers and folks internally know what was the record of that release? How do we make sure that we know what exactly is in that release? So in this case, we see that after operations has been alerted, then that information is added to a Confluence environment and then synchronized with Jira, so that we're able to take so that we have a record of what's in this release and we have a record of what's going on here. So think about what each of these, think about how you track this. Think about how you track the record of what was in this release, so that you're able to know and you're able to keep people informed about what happens. Let's go ahead and think about that here for a second. All right. So now that you're ready for deployment, what does that deployment process to production look like? So how do you go about it? Is there a particular tool that you use, or is there a particular process that you use? What does that look like in order to move into production? In this case, operations will use Octopus Deploy in order to deploy the code into a production level environment. And so that's the tool that operations would work with in order to get to production. So how does that deployment process look for you? What tools do you use? What processes do you use? Who's responsible for that? Think about all of these different things and think about what the deployment process would look like in order to get to production. So go ahead and think about that here now. Give you another second or so. All right. So now when it comes to operating, this is after production. So this is this is after deployment. So after the code has been released into, So after this is released into production. So how do you make sure that it's operating effectively? What are some of those post-deployment processes that you think through in order to make sure that it's operating effectively? Is there a way that you're tracking this? Is there a way that you're looking into this? Or is it something where, you're somehow staying up to date with what's going on in production? So in this case, you'll see that after deployment, the organization uses Ops Genie. And so from here, we track within Ops Genie, how things are going in production. Does it seem to be working properly? Are there any issues? Are there defects? Is there something going on that's causing an issue? And if so, you'll see that that's then escalated to tier 2 support, who then determines if it's a code problem, who then, triages it. And if so, they escalate to tier 3. And you see that this also is a way that bugs can enter into the system. And so you'll see this is a way to be able to get real-time feedback from production so that they're able to monitor it in a way that is, they're able to monitor it in a way that's, what's the word I'm looking for? They're able to monitor it proactively. And so think about how you're operating and how you're making sure that your release is operating effectively in production. How are you addressing this, and how are you making sure that your release is operating effectively in a production environment? So go ahead and think about this here. How are you monitoring and how are you checking? And then we'll go on to the next stage. All right. So the final piece that we have here is monitoring. And so beyond just simply looking at things from, is something broken? Is something not working properly? We want to be able to monitor as well and make sure that the customer's having a good experience in a production environment. We want to make sure that if there's anything that we could be doing better, if there's anything that they really like that we can really lean in on, we want to make sure that we're proactively tracking that customer's experience in a production environment. So is that something that your organization is doing today? And if so, how? How are you proactively tracking the customer's experience in a production environment? Is there a tool that you're using to be able to help, allow and solicit customer feedback? Is it something where you have, a customer success associate that's staying in touch with your customers and able to provide feedback back to the planning team about things that would be useful? How are you tracking this? And so what you can see here in this example, we have something like Get Feedback is the tool that, perhaps this hypothetical company could use. And so Get Feedback is being used to solicit this customer feedback from the environment, checking every so often, hey, how are you liking the product? Is there anything we could be doing better? What do you like the best? And then those responses, if somebody chooses to do so, is actually synchronized automatically with Microsoft Teams. And so like we saw before with the testing results, there's a dedicated Microsoft Teams channel that shows all the feedback coming in from customers about the product. And so there's a project manager that's on that channel and keeping an eye out on this feedback. And, some of it might just be, you guys are great. That's awesome. We'll put that in our back pocket. But there may be some that's also very targeted that says, hey, this is a feature that I would really love to see, or, this could be working a little bit better, or, oh man, I really like this. I would like you to do more of it. And so if they see something like that, or if they're seeing consistent feedback or something that just stands out as, wow, that's great, they can then take that information and add it into ServiceNow up on the requirements management side. And so in addition to soliciting ideas from folks via email or from just another avenue that they have to be able to garner ideas for for these types of things, they can go ahead and add they can go ahead and add some of this feedback directly from customers. And so this is a great opportunity to see that as we go throughout the value stream and as we go throughout each of the 8 individual DevOps stages, these stages are interrelated in a lot of ways. And so I want you to think about that. And that's kind of where we're landing here towards the tail end of today's presentation. One of those things is that if you have not done so already, I want you to think about each of these questions that were being asked. I want you to verify if those are true based upon talking with team members, and then arrange it by stage, chronologically, what happens first, then what happens next, and what are those stages that your organization uses to describe some of these methods. And so you'll see that if you do that, you'll end up with something like this. And you can start to see where some of those feedback loops are sending information back. You can start to see which individual teams are working in which individual areas. And you can start to really address some of this information head on. And you can start to see, is there anywhere that we can improve? And this can be really eye-opening for folks in your organization too, to see that what they're doing is impacting something very far down the line. And what someone behind them is doing is impacting them. And it can really help to improve team cohesion when they realize this is all one large organism. And so if you have not done so already, I want you to build out this map, verify it and arrange it by stage so you can start to get an idea what your end-to-end DevOps value stream looks like. So with the final few minutes we have, I want to talk about what you should do with that output once you've created it. What should you do with this value stream map? And where to go from here? We'll talk about value stream management. We'll talk about eliminating waste. And then we'll talk about where a value stream management platform could come into play. So as you might imagine, visualizing our value stream and building out a map is not enough by itself. It's like, as an example, if you're trying to get better about finances, you might be able to track your spending, which is a great first step. But until you build a budget and stick to it, you're not going to improve. You're just going to be able to see how much you're spending in each category. So you need to, likewise, have your value stream map. That's an important first step. But then you need to do something with it in order to experience all the benefit that you could have. And as you might imagine, building out this map is a little bit different than managing your value stream. This map is simply a visual outline of your software delivery process, which gives you the tool that you then need to identify and take action in order to improve, which is value stream management. And so as we think about value stream management, there's a book out there by Don Tapping, Loyster, and Shakur, where what you can see is the 8 different steps for value stream management. And we actually talked through 2 of them in depth today. We talked about a value stream, in this case, your DevOps software delivery value stream, and we mapped out the current state of that value stream. But you'll notice that there's a lot more steps. In this case, there's actually 8 steps. So there's multiple things that you can do in order to maximize your management of your value stream. And understanding lean principles and committing to lean principles is a big part of that. Each of these individual principles and each of these lean techniques are going to be very useful for your software delivery organization to get as effective and efficient as possible. But this is a lot. This is a lot to jump into in one day. And so I want to leave you with something very practical that you can start to do today. And a big part of that is understanding waste and what role that plays in your value stream, in your software delivery value stream. Now, waste is an activity that brings no value to the customer and that they're not willing to pay for. So ultimately, it's something that is simply a waste of time, a waste of resources, and a waste of, and a waste of effort. And there's multiple types of waste. You could have, as an example, motion waste if your developers need to toggle between 3 different tools in order to do what they need to do. There could be waiting waste if, as an example, there's, once something's waiting to be handed off, as an example, if the the smoke test environment person is waiting, 2 days to hand off to operations, then that's waiting waste. There's time being wasted there. If you're doing rework, that's a defect waste. And so what we want to do is just get rid of all the waste, right? Well, not exactly. We have to be very careful. And that's where the value stream map is so critical and so useful. Because what we can do with that map is we can actually break down each of those individual steps that we have into 3 categories: either value added, non-value added essential, or non-value added non-essential. Now, value added, these are the activities the customer is willing to pay for. Non-value added essential, it's something we have to do, but something that the customer is not willing to pay for. And then finally, non-value added non-essential. These are just the things that are a complete waste of time, money, and effort. So once we've identified those activities and where they fit, here's what we can do with them. If it's something value added, we can optimize and standardize this activity. We can try to figure out how we can be the best that we can be at this. If it's non-value added essential, we can seek to minimize it. If as an example, security is something that we have to do. It's something that we need, but it's something that the customer just expects. They don't want to pay for us to scan for vulnerabilities. They expect that we don't have any. And so how can we minimize the time and the money and the effort while still meeting the quality that we need to meet? That's something that we can really focus in on. And then finally, with non-value added, non-essential, that's a complete waste. Those are the activities that we can simply eliminate. And so if you're using your value stream within the value stream designer, something you could do is like this. You could color code based upon whether they're value added, non-value added essential, or non-value added non-essential. And so this might be your current state, which after you measure, you might realize that you have, that you're spending almost 12 days on this process. And then if you take some of those ideas and you start to tweak it accordingly, you start to minimize the time that you're spending on non-value added essential activities and you eliminate the non-value added non-essential activities, you could bring that time down significantly. And you could start to think about how waste reduction can work in your organization. So based on the map that I built out, here's some example of action that this company could take. They could automate the manual security scans to save time. They could eliminate updating a document when they already have the information in Microsoft Teams. They can train and empower tier 2 to be able to, write some of those bugs for the Jira environment so that tier 3 can be moved to other places to bolster the pipeline and to break up bottlenecks. And then finally, we could even add a feedback loop for customer estimates so that the customer is able to know, how is their information going? How is the bug that they've submitted coming along? And while that may add even a little bit of time, it's not waste, because this is critical. This is something where we can get a huge benefit to our customer satisfaction by adding a feedback loop here. And if we automate it, it's not going to really take any extra time anyway. And so just as the obligatory product plug here at the end, we believe that value stream management is all about seeing, measuring, and automating your value stream. And the value stream map is critical to be able to see your value stream. But once you're ready to measure and automate some of those activities, that's where our platform and our products can come into play. You can use value stream insights to be able to track some of these metrics and measure in real time. And you can also use value stream automation in order to automate the flow of information between these tools. So you can integrate, interoperate, trigger, and monitor some of the activities throughout your tool chain and eliminate some of those non-value added activities through automation of your tools. So we talked a little bit about the basics of value stream mapping today. I walked you through how to use the value stream designer. I walked you through a value stream assessment that's gotten you to start to think about some of these different things. And finally, I talked through some value stream management strategies that may be interesting for you to reduce waste. So keep an eye out for some additional information after today's workshop. And also, if you want to walk through with ConnectALL and have a more one-on-one type conversation, about whether your value stream is healthy and how you can utilize your map, you're welcome to reach out to us at sales@connectall.com or register through this URL. It's free. It's something that we're happy to walk through with you. And if you want to learn more about our value stream management platform, feel free again to reach out to sales@connectall.com or go ahead and register for a demo through that URL. I'd be happy to follow up with you with any questions that you may have or anything else that you need from me or any thoughts that you have on this workshop. You can email me, call me, or find me on LinkedIn, whatever works best for you. And I really appreciate the time. I appreciate you spending this last hour and a half with me walking through this workshop, walking through this assessment, learning how to use the Value Stream Designer. And I hope that as we continue, I hope that you'll be able to take the information that you learned today and begin to build out a value stream map of your very own. If there's any questions, I'd love to answer them. Feel free to reach out to me anytime. Otherwise, go ahead and have a wonderful rest of your day. Happy mapping, and look forward to the next time we're able to do something like this. Thanks and have a great rest of your day.